Ember app contains it all, your templates big and sometimes small. Learn routers, routes, components to let Ember models work for you. Controllers to help decorate the views which you can integrate. Mix them together in December, warming up with Ember.
You're watching Warming Up with Ember.js, and this is level 1, where we're going to be talking about how to get set up with Ember. Ember.js is a JavaScript framework used to create ambitious web applications. And there's a lot of companies that have used it in some form to create their own. In order to learn Ember.js, you're going to need to be familiar with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. If you're not, Code School has some great courses on that topic. Head over to the JavaScript path. You do not need to know any of the back-end frameworks like Ruby on Rails or Django to learn Ember, because Ember.js is a JavaScript framework, so it resides on the front end. Here's an example of an application that uses Ember. This is Discourse. It's effectively a discussion board. And as I click around on Discourse, you'll notice the pages load pretty quick. It's very responsive, you might say. This is one of Ember's strong points. Discourse itself is also a very dynamic website. A lot of the content in there is getting loaded from some sort of database on the back end. In a typical web application, we probably fetch information from the database and use that to render out HTML, which we then send back to the browser. Some web applications also have APIs, which might be used to communicate to native applications, like maybe on your iPhone through iOS or on your Android phone. But here's what's interesting about Ember. See, Ember sits on the client side and it communicates with your application through that same API, pulling data and then rendering different templates to the screen. Not only does Ember make navigation from page to page quick, but if you want to provide your user with instant feedback, like say a preview of the reviews they're typing, Ember makes this super simple. You wouldn't want to use Ember.js when your application doesn't have a lot of interactivity, like say with a blog or a newspaper or a static website. It might be overkill to go through and build a full-stack Ember application. To start building an Ember application, you'll want to go to the official Ember website and download the starter kit they have there. It contains all the libraries you need to get going. Also, if you want to communicate with a backend server and pull data through an API into your Ember application, then you might also want to grab Ember Data. Next up, in our application, we're going to be using Twitter Bootstrap just to make our website organized and look pretty. And so you might want to grab that as well if you're going to follow along with our course. You could play around with the starter kit, but we're going to build an Ember application from scratch so you can see what it looks like from the ground up. So let's start by building our index.html page. We'll start by including the jQuery framework as well as the handlebars framework, which we'll go into later. Then we'll include the base ember.js framework file as well as the Ember data library. Lastly, we'll include a file that we're going to create, app.js. Now, we're going to be working in this app.js file for most of this course. This is where all of our custom JavaScript is going to be placed. And lastly, we have our Twitter Bootstrap style sheet. As you might have noticed with the theme of this course, it all centers around these fire sprites. So we're going to create an online store for them because even fire sprites need online shopping. And they can buy things like flint, matches, and tinder in our online store called the Flint and Flame. In this first level, we're simply going to be building out the main index page and the about page. And the first step to build an Ember application is to create our application object. This application contains everything about our Ember app. And we basically namespace it by calling it app, but you could have called it anything you wanted to. You see that little icon there? Well, that means we're talking about the Ember application, and we're going to use that icon whenever we're talking about our application. It's the roots of our app, and we basically only need to create one of them, and all the other components grow from there. The first thing we can do with this application is send in a series of options as a JavaScript object. For example, if we wanted to log out a message to the browser every time a page is accessed, we could set log transitions to true. Now let's build out a little more of our index.html. We'll have a navbar, we'll have a container, and we'll have our footer. To open this application, we can actually just double-click on the index.html. You don't need any server to run an Ember application. So if we did that, and we looked at the source of our HTML, we would see something interesting. We would see that Ember added a body class and a data Ember extension to our code. This is so Ember knows what part of our web page it can control. In our store, we're going to be dynamically updating parts of the page based on what people click on. And in order to do that, we need some way of telling our browser what parts of our page are dynamic and can be changed. To do this, we're going to wrap our three elements in a template. By default, Ember.js uses handlebars template. Remember the library we included earlier, the handlebars library? So to wrap these in a template, we're simply going to use the script tag, like you see here. This is a handlebars template. So now if we open up our index.html in our browser and inspect the page, we'll notice that a new div has been added representing that handlebars template. And it even generated a unique ID for that div. Whenever we're talking about Ember templates, you're going to see this leaf icon. Templates, well, contain plain old HTML, and of course Ember uses handlebars.js, as I mentioned, for templates, and really it represents the part of the application that people see. That's why it's a leaf. Before we get much further, let's make sure that you understand what we're doing and get you starting to build your first Ember application.